Welcome to the first in an occasional series of videos that I'll be doing covering the various prototype games that have been released over the years by Opcode Games for the venerable ColecoVision console. Now, each one of the prototypes that you're viewing right now has only ever been produced in cartridge form and always in very limited quantities. Only 5 copies of each have ever been sold, some via eBay, with heated bidding driving up the price. So expect these carts to set you back at least several $100s each. That is, if you can find one for sale. And this makes the likelihood that you've seen these games actually running and being played very unlikely. And this is the main reason that I'm doing this series, to showcase rare ColecoVision games that very few have seen in action. For this first video in this series, I'll actually be covering the latest prototype that Opcode Games released as of May 2017, and that is a rather obscure game called Mouser. This prototype is a bit of a departure from prior releases in that this release comes in a plastic gatefold box of the same style as Opcode's recent Colour line of games. The cart label has some nice artwork on it compared to the prior plain Opcode Prototype Lab label, and the number released has been increased from 5 to 10. In line with the new styling, the release has been given a product number of PT0001, obviously hinting that more are to come. As with all of these prototype releases, Mouser doesn't come with any instructions, and so it is up to you to figure things out for yourself. Or you can try and track down a manual from the release for whatever platform the ColecoVision version was ported from. Now, I'd never heard of Mouser before picking up this game, and so did a little research to find out what it's all about. Mouser was originally developed as an arcade game by a Japanese company called UPL, or Universal Playland Corporation. A young 19-year-old Ryuichi Nishizawa was tasked as his first role with the company to develop a game based on Nintendo's Donkey Kong. Ryuichi was responsible for game design, graphic design, and sound, while another employee wrote the main program. The resulting arcade game was released in 1983 and today is incredibly rare. In fact, I have been unable to even find a picture of the arcade cabinet anywhere online. The premise behind the game is very familiar and not surprising considering that it was directly inspired by Donkey Kong. You play a cat called Mouser, think of Mario, whose new bride Maria, think of Pauline, has been captured and tied up by a horde of rather large-looking mice, think of Donkey Kong. Now, your objective as Mouser is to make your way up to the top of a 7-story house to rescue Maria, while avoiding all manner of classic mice weapons, such as bouncing drums that home in on you, bouncing boxes, potted plants, and bombs. And to make matters worse for Mouser, there are also caged stationary dogs who are deadly to the touch when the cage is lifted. Now, an interesting aside is that the dogs in the game are called Wanko, stop snickering at the back there, which is Japanese and can be roughly translated as meaning doggy. Now, the final hurdle for Mouser is to make the ladder to the top story appear, which is achieved by capturing a minimum number of mice. There are also fish and other objects scattered around each stage, which when eaten or collected give Mouser bonus points. A subtle added challenge for high scores in the game is that the fish occasionally change colour with differing points available depending on the colour of the fish when you eat them. Now, an early flyer for the game has a few interesting insights into the game's development, as it mentions features such as the dog chasing you, that eating the fish give Mouser a small speed boost and limited invincibility, mice nibbling away at the bottom of ladders, and that after stage 4 there being a bonus stage. Unfortunately, none of these features are present in the final game. The flyer also shows the first 3 stages in a different order, as well as a different 4th stage, which seems to have been dropped from the release game. The first stage is fairly easy, with a straightforward layout and only bouncing drums and boxes and stationary dogs to contend with. The second stage does away with the bouncing drums, but adds holes in the floor to jump over, as well as introducing bombs. The third stage introduces potted plants to the mix of items that are deadly to a cat, as well as the one and only elevator to appear in the game. Now, I wonder where they got inspiration for that from. The fourth stage reverts to the same deadly items as in the second stage, but this time the layout is a lot more challenging due to the many small platforms and jumps that are required. At the end of the fourth stage, the humorous mice swap Maria for what looks like to me to be a pig. Not very funny for poor Mouser. Upon completing the fourth stage, you then repeat the same 4 stages again, but this time with the added difficulty of a flying mouse to avoid. Beat these 4 stages and you're presented with a nice animated sequence where the mice appear to be chasing Mouser with a giant inflatable mouse. I'm rather confused as to why they chose to use Mendelssohn's Wedding March as the music in this sequence though. The next 4 stages are once more the same as before, but this time the difficulty is increased further with 2 flying mice to contend with. Now I haven't played the game beyond this point, so the rest is still a mystery to me. Unfortunately, most of the features of the arcade game are missing from the MSX and by default the ColecoVision versions, which I'll come on to right now. Mouser for the ColecoVision is a port of the Mouser game for the MSX1 computer, which was developed by UPL, the company behind the arcade game, and published in 1983 by Sony under the HitBits label. This game differs quite significantly from the arcade game, being greatly simplified due to the much lower memory and graphical capabilities of the MSX1 computer, as well as adjustments to fit a portrait screen orientation. For instance, each house now only has 5 stories instead of 7, there are only 3 different stages, no flying mice, and no intermission sequences. Oddly, the character names in the game also went through a dramatic shift, with the game's protagonist, Mouser, now being called or referred to as Tomcat. Maria, his bride, becomes Kitty, his girlfriend, and the mice are now referred to as the Frat Rats, despite still looking just like mice. Weird. Further oddities are found with their weapons. The rolling drums are now referred to as iron balls, despite the artwork making them look like alien fluffy sheep things with eyes. And the bombs are now referred to as dynamite, despite still looking like bombs. And a new classic mouse weapon makes an exclusive appearance in the MSX and ColecoVision versions. Wrenches. Strange. Anyway, fortunately confusion isn't total, as we at least find that potted plants are still potted plants and fish are still fish. I guess that the old idiom of things getting lost in translation is very true. Now, before I go ahead and show you some gameplay of the ColecoVision port, I just want to mention that the back of the MSX and ColecoVision boxes mention that eating the fish gives Tom power and energy, which is different to the arcade game where eating fish simply gives you bonus points. The odd thing about the MSX game's statement is that there is no energy bar for Tomcat, and so no means to measure or illustrate any boost in power or energy. Even odder is that when I play the ColecoVision port and have Mouser eat a fish, there is absolutely no discernible difference in Mouser's behaviour at all. So as far as I can tell, the only benefit the fish give is 300 points, which in itself is not to be sniffed at. With regard to the ColecoVision port, well, I have found it to be a more or less perfect port of the MSX version, and I've only found a couple of little odd bugs occurring which may or may not also be present in the MSX version. I just don't have the MSX game to play and compare it directly to. Anyway, enough rambling. Now I'm going to play through the first 6 screens of the ColecoVision version. So folks, as you can see, we do need the Opcode Super Game module to play this game. And we'll just wait for the options screen. And there you go, you can see on the options screen the only options are to play this with either 1 or 2 players. There are no difficulty options with this game, which I think is a shame. I'll come on to the way the difficulty in the game ramps up in a short while. So this is level 1, and this is the equivalent of stage 1 in the arcade game, in that there are no holes in the floor, no bombs to contend with, and it's pretty easy. The only real difference between this and the arcade version is that the mouse with the potted plant from stage 3 in the arcade version makes an appearance here. And that's the only thing from stage 3 in the arcade game that is included in the MSX and ColecoVision versions of Mouser. So we had 4 dark blue mice to collect on this level, and you can see that the green ladder at the top of the screen that allows us to get access to Kitty or Maria or whatever her name is, that just suddenly appeared. And it only appears once you've caught that final mouse that you need to capture. Unlike the arcade game where it gradually drops down and you get that ladder gets longer and longer until it finally reaches the ground. And that gives you a good clue as to how many more mice that you need to collect. You don't get that luxury in this version of the game. You have no clue as to how many mice you need to collect until you finally caught that final mouse and the green ladder appears. And I think that's a bit of a shame. I'd have liked to have seen that ladder drop down in the same way that it does in the arcade game. Anyway, so this is level 2, and this is, again, it's equivalent to stage 2 in the arcade game. You've now got holes in the floor and bombs are being thrown at you. And we had to collect 5 mice for this particular level. The unique thing about this level though is that there are wrenches now being thrown at you, and the wrenches do not appear in the arcade game. So that's I guess that's about the only unique feature that the MSX ColecoVision version has. So here we are on level 3, and this is equivalent to stage 4 in the arcade game, in that we've now got lots of small platforms to hop over, and again we've got bombs being thrown at us. So we have 6 blue mice to collect in this one. And you notice that there are the pink mice in the arcade game, and the pink mice are the ones that throw objects at you. In this version, they are the light blue or cyan mice. And like the pink mice in the arcade game, they are invincible. You can't capture them, and you can't use them to count towards the total you need to get the ladder to reach Kitty or Maria. Now I haven't mentioned the bonus countdown timer in the top right of the screen, and that's basically synonymous with the bonus countdown timer that features in the ColecoVision version of Donkey Kong and a number of other games. And that does add another kind of, I guess, difficulty aspect to this game, in that there is a finite amount of time that you have to get through each screen. And that doesn't feature in the arcade game. In the arcade game, as far as I could tell, you get a fixed bonus upon completion of a level, and I didn't see any evidence that there was a time limit for completion of any of those screens. So that is a big difference here. And the way the game's difficulty ramps up is that literally as you get further and further into this game, you just have to collect more and more blue mice. And that might sound like that's going to be a big challenge because you have that bonus countdown timer, but the bonus countdown timer value also increases. And I found it keeps increasing. Certainly I've gone through to about screen 13, screen 14 on this version. And I've always found that the bonus countdown timer is never a challenge. You can always easily capture the required number of mice in well within the time that's allowed. And I think that's a bit of a shame as well, because the difficulty level doesn't seem to ramp up along a steep enough curve, and it doesn't seem to be, the difficulty doesn't seem to be balanced well enough to my mind. So we just went back, after we completed the first 3 screens, we went back to level 2, and we've now progressed on to level 3 again. So it's gone 1, 2, 3, 2, 3. And it's that sequence of screens that you go through, and it just cycles through that again and again. So it's always 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3. But once you've completed the 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, that's when the difficulty ramps up, and you then have more mice to collect, and the bonus countdown increases. So we haven't reached that point yet, because we're still only on the 1, 2, 3, 2, 3 piece here. So we haven't finished that first entire sequence. So we still only have 6 mice to collect, and we've still got the same, ouch, not paying attention there. And we still have the same starting bonus countdown timer value of 6,000. I guess it wouldn't be a real Let's Play if there wasn't a few failures and a few deaths. So you just notice I'm moving mouse up and down that ladder fairly quickly there, and you've got the same and is moving slowly first of all there. You've got the same trick that is featured in the ColecoVision version of Donkey Kong, in that if you do a double tap up or down on a ladder, it does allow Mouser, or in Donkey Kong's case Mario, to move up and down the ladder more quickly than if you just push up once or pull down once. So that trick is featured in this version of Mouser. It does make me wonder if they dissected a ROM when they were programming this game, because I know that they did do that for the arcade game, in that they did dissect the ROM of Donkey Kong, the arcade game, to allow them to figure out how they could build the arcade version or program the arcade version of Mouser, because the team at the time had absolutely no experience in that area and they really didn't know what to do. So there we go. So that's the end of the first 5 screens. So that's the first main sequence finished. So we now go back to level 1. Bonus countdown timer has increased to 7,000 starting value. And previously, when we were on level 1 at the very beginning, we only had 4 mice to collect. Now we have 8 mice to collect. And you can see there is a flying mouse at the top of the screen next to Kitty or Maria or whatever. Okay, not paying attention. That's the thing, is never get caught on those ladders when the mouse with the potted plant is around. You need to be very careful that you're nowhere near underneath that mouse when you are on a ladder. Get off the ladder quick. Yeah, so there is a flying mouse at the top of the screen next to Kitty or Maria, whatever her name is, but it's stationary throughout the entire game, never moves. And I think that would have been fantastic to have been able to include what they have in the arcade game, is that as you get into the later levels, that the flying mouse makes an appearance to really ramp up the difficulty level. But unfortunately that's not the case. Now here you can see there's a lot of screen flicker. That is very apparent in this, and it does also feature in the MSX version. So the ColecoVision version is no worse than the MSX version. They essentially utilize the same Texas Instruments graphics chip, and it has the same limitations of 4 sprites per line. That flickering is not a ColecoVision issue as such. But this game is a great contender for an F18A equipped system, because it would get rid of the flickering. Anyway, I'm going to stop there, folks. I think that's probably enough gameplay to show you for this video. I'm not going for a high score or anything after all. I have played through the first 13 screens of this game, and I got to the point where I ultimately had to collect up to 14 mice, and I'm just assuming that the difficulty just keeps ramping up by the number of mice that you need to collect, going up and up and up and up. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've had great fun putting it together and playing both the arcade and ColecoVision version of this game, and I'm really looking forward to trying out the other Opcode prototype games and going through those in some detail. So please stay tuned. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up below. That really helps me out. If you want to be notified when I put up more of these Opcode Proto videos, then please subscribe to my channel. Anyway, folks, thank you very much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.